Yo, what is going on everybody? And today I'm going to be telling you guys what I watched in the month of April. If that sounds interesting, let's get right into the video. Yo, what's up everybody? My name is Dominic from the channel Dominic Talks Movies, the best place to talk about movies. And today I'm going to be giving you guys all of the films that I watched in the month of April. I know everyone does this and it's probably a video that nobody really cares about, but I'm going to do it anyway for the select few of you who do care. So without further ado, I think I should get right into it. I started off the month by rewatching Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, and it is an absolute masterpiece. This is overall, I think, in my opinion, objectively one of the greatest films ever made. I mean, I don't like using the word objectively, so I'm going to say in my subjective objective opinion, I think it is one of the greatest films ever made, and in my top 10 of all time. This is absolutely a flawless movie, and it's just amazing and is incredibly relevant today, which is a little scary, but at the same time it just is so good. I highly recommend everyone watch this if you haven't seen it already. Then I watched Edgar Wright's Shaun of the Dead because I had only really seen one of his movies previously. I technically two, I guess, but I didn't really remember one of them too much. Regardless, I wanted to get into the Cornetto trilogy because I hadn't seen any of them, and I did like this movie quite a bit. It has grown on me a little bit over time. But I don't think it's amazing. I mean, a lot of people say these films are all masterpieces and it's like one of the best trilogies ever. I'll say so far I highly disagree, but you know, it's fine. It's a great movie, and I think it does do a pretty solid mix of genres. I didn't care too much about the romance aspect, but I can admit that it was done well. There's some pretty great performances by Simon Pegg, Nick Frost. The story was pretty bonkers. It kind of put a twist on the zombie genre. I like how it paid homage to the legendary George A. Romero, who obviously made Night of the Living Dead, probably the most legendary zombie movie of all time. And yeah, I think overall this is a movie that I know I could have loved more, but I'm happy for what it did for me. Then up next, I watched The Truman Show, which honestly surprised me. I thought I was going to like this one, but I definitely liked it more than I was expecting. This was quite a great movie. Jim Carrey gives a phenomenal performance. This is one of the wittiest films I've ever, like, the idea for this movie is just absolutely crazy, and I have no idea how someone would even begin to write this movie, but it was written really well. There's only a few things there's a few plot holes with the guy who's kind of controlling the whole thing. You don't really know why he's doing it, and then I think the ending could have been fleshed out a little bit more, and I think those are things that are preventing it from being a 5, but other than that, it's an amazing movie that it had me invested all the way through. Then I rewatched Zack Snyder's Justice League with my family, and it is still phenomenal. I know a lot of people are giving this one flack. It doesn't have a crazy high average score, but not like a low one. I personally just think this film is absolutely amazing. I loved it just as much the second time around. It's just so amazing, and I honestly would rewatch it again. For being 4 hours long, this is a surprisingly rewatchable movie. Then I rewatched Citizen Kane because it had been over a year since I seen this movie. I'm going to do a video kind of going way deeper into it in the future because on this rewatch, I realized that I think this is the greatest movie ever made. I know that's not necessarily an unpopular opinion, but I honestly, I truly believe it is the greatest movie ever made. It's phenomenal. It's a really interesting and investing story, which is why I think it makes the greatest movie ever made. But on top of that, you got the technical aspects that everyone who even don't like the story recognize it for. So overall, I think this is basically a perfect movie, and that's why I think it's the best movie ever made. Then I started my PTA binge of sorts. You know, I'm not really going through his films really quickly, but I started watching PTA's movies with Punch Drunk Love. This is my very first from him, and it was surprisingly good. I know I was expecting quite high. I had high expectations. which is never a good thing, but I wouldn't say this movie disappointed me. Adam Sandler can definitely act. This is a great role. I don't think it's necessarily his best role. I think I like him a little better in Uncut Gems, but this is still a role that proves he can actually act, and I really liked it for that. Up next, I rewatched another Edgar Wright film, and that is Baby Driver. This movie is absolutely phenomenal. This is easily my favorite Edgar Wright movie. This is one of my favorite movies of all time now. I think it's in my top 15. This is a movie that, in my opinion, can be appealing to anybody. You show this to like a film major and they can have their eyes glued onto the screen with the amazing editing, some great cinematography, amazing technical elements is basically what I'm saying. But then you could show it to someone who has never dissected or looked for meaning or technical aspects in a film in their life, and they just want to be entertained, and they would love this movie. And that is what I think the beauty of this film is, and it's just, I'm kind of get the best of both worlds, because I like dissecting film, I like kind of showing the technical aspects, but I also like to be entertained, so I got both of those mixed into one, and that is why I absolutely love this movie. Then I rewatched Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction for God knows how many times, probably like the 10th time, and it is still easily one of my favorite movies of all time. I believe it is still in my top 5. This is a just incredible movie. I think this might have the best dialogue of all time. I used to say this was easily the best dialogue of all time, but given a rewatch that I had later in this month, which I'll explain later, this has competition now. You know, it might still be the best, but it definitely has competition now. Some amazing performances, gripping story, out of chronological order story, which isn't disorienting, it works. This movie just is amazing. It works in every front for me, and it's just incredibly entertaining as well. It's just a fantastic movie. If you somehow haven't seen this movie, just drop whatever you're doing and go watch it, because everyone needs to see this. Then I rewatched Mank so I could watch all of the Best Picture nominees, and I really did like it. I think I liked it a little bit more than I did on first watch. I absolutely love Gary Oldman and Amanda Seyfried in this movie. They're both fantastic. The cinematography is beautiful. The set designs are incredible. The story is pretty interesting to me as someone who, as I said before, absolutely loves Citizen Kane. And it's just such a good movie on a technical level, and it has the story enough to keep my interest for the whole runtime, and that is why I think this is such a great movie. Then I watched my second PTA film, and that is There Will Be Blood. This was one of the ones that kind of kickstarted my review series back up on my channel, because this movie was so good that I felt I had to make a video on it, a review, and it's just so amazing. This is, obviously my favorite PTA film so far, as you can tell from what I thought of Punch Drunk Love. This is, quite frankly, I would say this is a flawless movie. Daniel Day-Lewis gives probably one of the best performances ever. Some beautiful cinematography, great, amazing score. This movie is just fantastic, and now this is the one that made me not be able to wait to see the rest of PTA's filmography. I then rewatched all MCU Phase 1 movies, and if you want to get my more detailed thoughts, then watch my MCU Phase 1 ranked video that I posted a few days ago. Then to continue my Ghibli watch through, I watched Howl's Moving Castle, and this was pretty easily my least favorite of Studio Ghibli's films so far. I've only seen 4, but this is the only one that I've given less than a 4.5 out of 5 to. This one I gave a 3.5 out of 5, so it's not a bad movie by any means. It is actually a good movie. I would argue it's quite a good movie, but it wasn't one that really blew me away. I think this had a lot of creativity, but it felt way longer than it was, so I had some pacing issues. But then, and also the third act, kind of when it dove deep into the war side of things, felt really kind of off-putting for me, considering this film was, up until that point, sort of just an exploration, a sort of thing to kind of revel in the whole world that they built and the magic that they kind of explored. and then they kind of went a really dark turn in the third act that really did not work for me. I think this film would have been much higher if it was cut a little bit shorter and if it didn't have the war aspects to it. I know they tried to do that to have sort of some emotion mixed in, but it didn't really work for me. This probably would have been a 4, maybe even a 4.5 out of 5 if they didn't add those war aspects, but they were in fact in there. Doesn't make it a bad movie, but it definitely kind of takes away from what it could have been, in my personal opinion. Then I watched My Neighbor Totoro for my Studio Ghibli binge, and I really loved it. This is a film that really just took me back to my childhood. This was pure bliss and joy for an hour and a half, I believe. It was just absolutely fantastic, and I had such a good time watching this movie. Then I watched Jason and the Argonauts on Netflix, and it was pretty good. I mean, I wasn't expecting much out of this movie. This was just one where I threw it on because why not? And it was a good enough entertaining movie. Has some great special effects for the time from Ray Harryhausen. But other than that, not a super memorable movie. Then I rewatched what is now my favorite movie of all time, Before Sunrise. You might have seen my video saying that this is my new favorite film of all time, but I rewatched it and I just felt it that much more this time around for whatever reason. It's just absolutely phenomenal, and because it's my favorite movie, I feel like I owe it to this movie to make an entire dedicated video for it. So I won't say too much, but I will just say the chemistry between Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy is fantastic, and the writing and screenplay and just dialogue is maybe the best of all time. Then I watched Minari to watch the Best Picture nominees, and I also made a video on that, so if you want to see that, definitely check out my channel. But this is one that was definitely up there with some of my favorites. I absolutely loved how this film looked, how it kind of was in tone, and this was just easily one of my favorites. I really enjoyed watching this movie. Then I rewatched Zack Snyder's 300, and I didn't really change my opinion on it. It is a pretty good movie. It has definitely some Zack Snyder visuals, but it definitely has a lot of flaws that I can't really look past. But overall, a pretty epic, very masculine and angry movie, I guess. Then I rewatched Fantastic Mr. Fox just to confirm if Before Sunrise was actually my favorite movie, and while I absolutely still adore this movie to every single last scene, I do believe right now Before Sunrise is my favorite film. Fantastic Mr. Fox, I love it to death. I mean, I will not forget it. Maybe there will be a point in time where I kind of make a realization that Fantastic Mr. Fox is actually still my favorite movie, but as of right now, it is my second favorite, but I still can't say that this movie isn't like absolutely perfect in my opinion. There is absolutely nothing wrong with this film. Then I watched another Edgar Wright film, Hot Fuzz, definitely one of his more popular and one of the ones that a lot of people say is maybe his best. And to be fair, I was actually a little bit disappointed by this movie. Again, 3.5 out of 5, not a bad movie. I'm kind of sad that I have to preface that, but it is not a bad movie. It is a good movie, but it has so much weird stuff. I knew going into it that it was supposed to be over the top, but some of it was just so stupid and not in a good way. There was some really good aspects, hence why I gave it a good score with some fantastic editing, but I just couldn't get past how weird it actually was. Maybe that's the point, but it really did not work for me. Then my final Best Picture nominee that I watched was Sound of Metal, and it was my favorite. This has some amazing sound mixing, some amazing performances, a great, amazing screenplay that really the pacing is fantastic. This movie overall is just definitely my favorite Best Picture nominee. If you want to hear kind of my full thoughts, again, check out the video that I did on my channel. Then I watched Howard Hawks' His Girl Friday, because I wanted to kind of explore more movies from the 40s, and this kind of just proves why I think that the 40s are the best decade for film. This movie was just entertaining, blistering pace. This was such a fast-paced movie, fast-paced dialogue. Everyone talked fast. Everyone was trying to get places super fast. It was really frantic, and I honestly really loved it. I love Cary Grant in this role. I think he did really, really well. But I think Rosalind Russell just absolutely steals the show as Hildy. I mean, she was so fantastic in this movie, and it was impossible not to just love her and be attracted to her. She was so amazing in this film, and everything about this movie, the dialogue and the story, are just absolutely fantastic. I think this is a pretty accessible 40s movie as well, so if you want to get into more classics, this is one that I highly recommend. Then I watched Nosferatu, the original from the 1920s, to kickstart the Dozen a Decade Film Challenge. If you don't know what the Dozen a Decade Film Challenge is, and if you don't follow me on Letterboxd, definitely make sure to do so. The link is in the description. But basically what it was created by my friend Orich Entertainment. Also, you can follow him on Letterboxd. I'm sure you'll be able to find him on some of my reviews and stuff. But basically what it is for every decade in film, you choose 12 movies. So I went all the way from the 1920s all the way up to the 2020s. You choose 12 films from that decade and from every decade. So I had a total of 132 movies on that list. You can go at your own pace, you can watch them whenever you feel like it, and you kind of just go through film history to see how movies have evolved and how they've changed over time. I thought it was an absolutely brilliant idea, so I wanted to hop on board. This was my very first 1920s movie that I chose, and it was very good. I absolutely loved Max Schreck as Count Orlok, or I guess as Count Dracula. This was a creepier Dracula in my opinion, and I thought for a sort of horror film, I thought it worked better than Bela Lugosi, but I think Bela Lugosi's Dracula overall is better. I think the tone and atmosphere of this film were absolutely amazing, but I feel like the fact that it was a silent film did work at times. Like, I think for Count Orlok, it was very, very good because I think not hearing him speak made him all that much creepier. But also at the same time, it kind of made the film very dragged out and not very well paced. But overall, I did enjoy this movie. Then I rewatched this movie right here, Jurassic Park, and it was so incredible. It is now in my top 50 favorite movies of all time. I remembered it being very good, but I didn't remember how amazing it actually was. This is just an amazing, amazing movie that I absolutely loved all the way through. Then for my second Dozen a Decade Film Challenge movie, I watched Safety Last, and it was very, very good. I really thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I think even though it was a silent, the kind of text pieces didn't really affect the pacing of the film at all, which I thought was very well done. There was a great lead performance. The story is very interesting, even though it's really simple, and the tower climbing sequence alone is worth the price of admission. Finally, to end off the month, I watched M. Night Shyamalan's Unbreakable, and it was quite disappointing, I have to say. I've heard a lot of people praise this movie very highly, but it just wasn't super interesting to me. I think it had a lot of potential with the concept it was given. I think the direction of the film was very, very good. There was some good performances, not anything amazing, but the first two acts were just unbearably slow. I mean, I get maybe that's the point of it, but they were just so slow. It was not really entertaining, and although it did build to a third act and an ending that was absolutely amazing, I can't ignore the fact that it was basically a snooze fest for the first 2/3 of the film. I feel bad kind of just roasting someone's hard work, but you know, it was not interesting in the slightest until the last third of the movie, in my opinion. And that's all I watched in the month of April. If you've seen any of these films, definitely let me know what you think of them in the comments. Also, let me know what your favorite film is that you watched in the month of April. Mine was rewatching Before Sunrise because it's now my favorite film of all time. But that is basically it for this video, guys, and I will see you all in the next one.